Hello, and welcome to a Rodent's guide on the Chaos Cult in Kill Team 2024. This video will serve as a general introduction to the Chaos Cult Kill Team, as well as a specialist video for those that have played the team before. Like always, there will be timestamps in the description below to help you navigate this guide. It does include any changes to the team as a result of the second balanced data slate that dropped on 30 April 2025. My name is Mouse. Let's get into the video. The Chaos Cult is a team of regular dudes who operate under the banner of Chaos. They're a 14 operative team that can be split into two main groups, the 9 standard cultist devotees and the 5 members of the Dark Commune who acts as the leadership core of the group. The Dark Commune members each have their specialist flavor, which we'll talk about shortly, but the primary workhorse of this team is actually the innocuous devotee. These standard humans aren't much to write about initially, but as the game progresses, they can become increasingly blessed with the favor of the Chaos Gods, turning them into devastating abominations that are terrifying on the battlefield. As for team variants or roster choices, this kill team has one arrangement that you cannot deviate from. This makes decision about who to bring pretty easy, so let's go ahead and get to know the team. Before we talk operatives, let's run through the faction rules for the Chaos Cult kill team. There are 2 faction abilities for this team, and they go hand in hand with each other. The first rule are the accursed gifts that you can grant to your devotees as the game plays out. The first time that any devotee mutates into a different operative, you must pick an accursed gift to give to your entire team. There are 6 gifts to choose from, and once you pick your stage 1 gift, it will apply to anyone who has undergone a mutation for the remainder of the battle. Deformed Wings is gift number 1, both on the list and in my heart. This gift grants all mutated operatives increased mobility, allowing them to treat all climbs as 2 inches and ignore dropping distances. This is the same movement ability that Reavers have from the Phobos team, which makes them incredibly quick to move around the battlefield and allows you to create really unexpected angles of attack by nearly ignoring terrain. Fleet is the second gift, which simply grants all mutated operatives an additional 1 inch on their movement stat. This isn't a complex one, but is probably a default pick where verticality doesn't matter, like Into the Dark. It also opens up the possibility for asymmetric charges if you can outposition your opponent, so don't be afraid to take this simple gift if it does what you want it to. The third gift is Chitinous, which improves the save stat of all mutated operatives by 1. This means that instead of saving on 5s, you'll save on 4s, but I'll go ahead and tell you this probably isn't worth it. Most of the time, if our cultists are getting shot, they're not going to survive, so I personally skip over this gift in favor of more offensive threat. Our fourth gift on the list is Horned, which is our first gift that behaves differently depending on the level of mutation that the user has. If the user is a mutant, you can inflict 1 damage on an enemy operative when they perform the charge action and end in control range of them. If the user is a torment, you can deal D3 damage instead. This can help out with some damage breakpoints, but it won't be relevant all the time, so make sure that you know exactly why you are taking this when you do. Regardless, I wouldn't take it as my first gift, since 1 damage is usually insignificant, but I might consider it in some cases for my torments. Just remember that it only affects things when you are charging. The 5th gift is Sinewed, which does 2 things for us. First, it gives us the ability to ignore changes to our hit stat in melee as a result of injury, which is always nice. And second, it gives our weapons the brutal keyword. Both of these aspects can be super useful, so don't be afraid to use this gift for one or the other. If you get value out of both, that's just extra goodness. Our final gift is Barbed, which I think has some hidden sauce for the team in certain matchups. This gift also has 2 points for whenever your affected operative is fighting or retaliating. First, enemy operatives cannot assist. Second, and more importantly, whenever you strike in melee combat, you can deal 1 damage to each other enemy operative within this operative's control range, or D3 damage if this operative is a torment. This is truthfully just a crazy upgrade to our damage output if you can catch your opponent grouped up. Similar to the Horned gift, I wouldn't take it as my first gift, but I frequently take it as my second gift when I'm mutating my first torment of the game and sending them into the opponent's front line. The second faction rule is Mutation. As a strategic gambit, you can mutate a number of friendly operatives based on the turning point as follows. Turning point 1 is 2 operatives, turning point 2 is also 2 operatives, turning point 3 is 3 operatives, and turning point 4 is 4 operatives. Additionally, whenever a friendly devotee operative incapacitates an enemy operative within its control range, it can mutate. Each operative can only mutate once per turning point, and whenever a friendly operative mutates, do one of the following things. If it is a devotee operative, turn it into a mutant. If it is a mutant operative, turn it into a torment, which can be done a maximum of 2 times per turning point, or it can regain up to D3 plus 1 wounds. As a team-wide rule, you cannot have more than 5 mutants and 3 torments on the board at one time. There are then some rules that describe how to swap the miniatures on the table, which behave like you would think. Place the new model as close to the old model's position as possible. If they were in control range of other operatives, they should again be in that if possible. Important to note here that when you mutate from a mutant to a torment, your base size increases from 25mm to 40mm, which means that you can mutate into control range of targets as a strategic gambit. We can discuss some tech for this, but if you have the last activation of a turning point, you can move and dash a mutant just outside of 1 inch from an enemy, and then mutate them into a torment at the beginning of the next turning point to trap them in combat. This is a useful trick if your mutant is just outside of charge range, or if you want them to still have a conceal order instead of switching to engage for the charge. It'll come up more than you think. Now, let's take a look at the operatives available to the Chaos Cult kill team. The leader for this team is the Cult Demagogue, who has 8 wounds like the other Dark Commune operatives, and like the entire team, saves on 5s. In addition to their standard pistol, they have a unique weapon profile that can work as both an ultra short range attack or as a melee option. Their Diabolical Stave is actually decently scary in melee when buffed, so don't sleep on this as a cleanup option for enemies that get damaged working through your front line. The real function of this operative, however, is the utility that they bring with their 2 unique actions, Insight Slaughter and Insight Urgency. Insight Slaughter allows you to force another friendly Chaos Cult operative, visible and within 9 inches, to immediately perform a free fight action. And Insight Urgency does the same, except that it's a free dash or a 3-inch charge. Being able to manipulate the placement or actions of other allied operatives outside of their sequence is a bit useful as a strategic flex that experienced players will learn to exploit to catch their opponents off guard. It requires a lot of experience for this to be a natural part of your game plan though, so make sure the Demagogue is in the right general area of the battlefield at the right time, which will take some trial and error. Next up are the 2 Blessed Blade operatives, who serve as the primary human bodyguards for the Dark Commune. There are 2 of these operatives, and they don't have any ranged weapons by default. They have 2 abilities that are passive, Cut Them Down, and Attuned to Purpose. Cut Them Down is a gotcha trap that activates when an enemy operative within their control range attempts to use the fallback action. When they do, you can choose to inflict D3 plus 1 damage on that enemy operative before they move, and this increases to 2d3 plus 2 if they are within control range of both Blessed Blades when they attempt to fall back. Attuned in Purpose gives the 2 Blessed Blades a special kind of group activation. As long as they are within 6 inches of each other when they are activated, they can activate at the same time and complete their actions in any order while doing so. This can be super useful for improving their average melee profile, since you can charge with the first blade and then charge with the second blade on the same target, and then fight with one of them to ensure that they're giving each other combat support. With this tag team, they can reliably kill a Space Marine in a single activation as long as they can both charge the same target. The downside to this is that only one of those Blessed Blades is likely to be standing afterwards. The Iconarch is this team's icon bearer, who also happens to be this team's flamethrower. With 4 attacks hitting on 2s and 4/4 damage, this operative is bad news for regular humans and elves. The other aspect to this operative is the aura that they can provide from their Ruinous Icon ability. For 1 AP, this operative can choose to create a 4-inch aura that lasts until they activate again or are incapacitated. That aura can either grant allies +1 damage to normal and critical hits when their target is within 4 inches of the Iconarch, or they can reduce normal and critical damage dealt to them by 1 as long as they are within 4 inches of the Iconarch. I've primarily used this as a defensive aura because it's hard to find a time where I would be that close to an enemy operative and would prefer to buff allied damage instead of just hit them with a flamethrower. But it does make for a decent anti-engage tool for Turning Point 2, since you can sometimes get the Iconarch into a position where they would be able to shield your front line a bit from any initial aggression at the start of the Turning Point. The final Dark Commune operative for this team is the Mind Witch, who is a unique operative with several roles that they can fill. First to note is their Strange Ranged Weapon, which is 5 attacks, hitting on 3s with 0/0 damage, lethal 3 up, and devastating 2. This effectively is a pistol that cannot be saved against, allowing them to weirdly be able to force through 6 damage onto a valid target with pretty good reliability. They also come with 2 unique actions, Heinous Deluge and Malefic Vortex. Heinous Deluge has you select one enemy operative that is a valid target for this operative. Until the end of that operative's next activation, subtract 1 from its APL stat. This can create some really tough board positions for your opponents, and against some teams, it can effectively eliminate the threat of an operative altogether. The second ability, Malefic Vortex, places a token on the battlefield somewhere that is visible to this operative or on a vantage point that is visible to this operative. Then inflict 1 damage on each enemy operative within 2 inches of that marker, and at the ready operative step of every turning point thereafter, inflict 1 more damage on each enemy operative within 2 inches of that marker. Most of the time, this is just chip damage on targets, but it can do some surprising mental damage to the opposing player across the table and convince them to vacate certain positions. If you can catch 2 or more operatives grouped up and tag them for 2 damage apiece, this creates some decent action economy value, and it can actually help to break some damage breakpoints as well. I frequently look to tag multiple operatives with a Malefic Vortex towards the end of Turning Point 1, since most players are just staging for their Turning Point 2 push anyway. I then spend the rest of the game usually sapping away critical APL with Heinous Deluge and driving my opponents crazy. Outside of the Dark Commune, we have 9 Chaos Devotees, who don't have great stats, but do come with a mandatory group activation ability. Their damage is pretty lacking at 2-3 for both ranged and melee, but we do have ways to decrease their variance and help them to get doing their part. The other thing to remember is that if one of these guys manages to land a killing blow in melee, they can mutate. This is super important for us because we want to have access to as many mutations as possible in most cases, and we otherwise are limited to just those that we can force at the beginning of a turning point. Once a devotee mutates, they are replaced with a mutant, who loses their pistol in favor of an improved melee weapon profile. Still 4 attacks and hitting on 4s, but now with 3/4 damage and the ceaseless and rending keywords. No increase to the overall wounds here either, but they do get unnatural regeneration, which decreases damage of 3 or more by 1 if you roll a 5-up each time you are struck with an attack die. An important downside to be aware of for mutants is that mission actions and the pickup marker action now costs an additional 1 AP to perform, excluding operating hatches. So, although we want to keep as many mutants as possible because they turn into torments and provide offensive pressure, remember to keep some as regular humans so that you can continue to score on the crit op if it requires you to be doing an action. The final stage of our mutations are the Torments, which get some substantial profile upgrades for their trouble. Now they grow to 13 wounds and have 5 attacks hitting on 4s with 4/5 damage, ceaseless, and rending. They also still have the same unnatural regeneration as the mutants, which adds even more durability to their chassis. These Torments have one thing on their mind though, and it's not mission actions. They lose the ability to perform mission actions or pick up markers entirely, making them solely driven to spill opponent blood. Although it rarely comes up, Torments also cannot use light cover to prevent being targeted if they have a conceal order, but heavy terrain still works like normal. In summary, these monsters are terrifying in melee combat due to their basic stat block and the accursed gifts that they're given along the way. Just don't ask them to do anything else. With the operatives in the back of our mind, we can take a look at the strategic and firefight ploys available to the team next. Exaltation in Pain allows you to ignore any changes to the stats of friendly Chaos Cult operatives as a result of being injured, including weapon stats. Additionally, whenever an operative is shooting a friendly Chaos Cult operative that's wounded, you can re-roll one of your defense dice. While this has pretty good value packed in, I don't really use this ploy too much because I feel my operatives don't really find themselves being injured all that often. Sadly, they usually just die once they're getting shot at, or fighting, unless they're a torment, in which case I would be considering having the Sinewed gift to allow them to ignore injury for weapon stats anyway. I just haven't found much success trying to improve the survivability of the cult, if I'm honest. Fervent Onslaught, however, is a ploy that I use every turning point, starting from turning point 2 onward. All friendly Chaos Cult operatives get accurate 1 in melee, or accurate 2 if that operative is a mutant or torment. This is incredible for increasing the reliability of our operatives when doing exactly what we want them to be doing. Hitting on 4s doesn't matter as much when you're already retaining 2 hits every time we're fighting. Statistically speaking, this makes our mutants reliably get 3 hits in combat, and our torments get 4 hits in combat. I love this ploy, I use it all the time. Creatures of Nightmare is a niche strategic ploy that decreases the total APL stat of enemy operatives that contest a marker if at least one of those enemy operatives is within 2 inches of a friendly mutant or torment operative. This isn't an actual APL stat change, which makes it cumulative with actual changes, but otherwise, this comes up pretty rarely. We have plenty of ploys that we want to spend our command points on, so I'm hard-pressed to find value in spending for this one outside of niche scenarios. If it was a Firefight ploy, I'd be much happier with it, but because we have to decide at the beginning of the turning point to use it, there's a lot less value there. I usually don't worry about how much APL my opponent has on a point, because I'm just going to try to kill all their operatives off of it instead of trying to wrestle for control. The final strategic ploy, Sickening Aura, is another favorite of mine for this team. Whenever an enemy operative is within 2 inches of a mutant or torment operative, worsen the hit stat of their weapons by 1. This isn't cumulative with injury, but it cannot be ignored with things like And They Shall Know No Fear, which makes it very punishing into most teams. I often budget my command points so that I'm spending for this ploy in turns 2 and 3 at least, since it can really disrupt your opponent's combat math. Moving over to the Firefight ploys, first up is Faithful Follower. Use this Firefight ploy when a friendly Chaos Cult Dark Commune operative is selected as the valid target of a shoot action or to fight against during the fight action. Select one other friendly Chaos Cult operative, excluding Dark Commune operatives, visible to and within 3 inches of the targeted Dark Commune operative. That selected Chaos Cult operative then becomes the valid target or is fought against instead as appropriate, even if they wouldn't normally be valid for this action. If it's the fight action, treat that other operative as being within the fighting operative's control range for the duration of that action. If it's the shoot action, the other operative is only in cover or obscured if the original target was. This ploy has no effect if it's the shoot action and the ranged weapon has the blast or torrent weapon rule. This ploy has a lot to unpack, but to sum it up, you can protect your Dark Commune operatives by throwing a non-Dark Commune operative in the way as a sacrifice if they are visible and within 3 inches of that targeted Dark Commune operative. This makes it super important to spread out your devotees throughout your ranks as you move up the board, since you can protect your trades by forcing your opponent into suboptimal trades when they're trying to initiate them. Also remember that this applies to your mutants and torments as well. If someone tries to run past your big chaos monster to get to a Dark Commune guy, you can eat them nearly for free. Abhorrent Mutation is declared when you activate a friendly Chaos Cult operative, excluding Dark Commune operatives. You can select an accursed gift for that operative to gain for the remainder of the battle, in addition to the ones that they may already have access to from mutating. This can be used only once per battle for each operative, and if they mutate further in the future, they can retain this additional gift. Remember how I talked about sometimes certain gifts were going to be useful, but not all the time, and not necessarily enough to merit dedicating for your whole squad? This is exactly when those gifts come in handy. Specifically, gifts like Fleet for the 1 extra inch of movement, Horned for the extra damage on a charge, and Barbed for the collateral damage into other enemy operatives in control range when fighting or retaliating. Just remember that this takes a command point to do, so it can get expensive to do over and over again. Frenzied Demise is used when a friendly mutant or torment operative is incapacitated, but before it is removed from the kill zone. Inflict D3 damage, or D6 if that operative is a torment, onto one enemy who is visible and within 2 inches of that friendly operative. Effectively, you can spend a command point to blow up a mutated operative and try to take someone down with you. I've never really found a good spot for this, but it can definitely catch an opponent off guard if they narrowly manage to take down one of our monsters. Consider keeping a spare command point for this, just in case. The chance at dealing d6 damage is no joke. The final Firefight ploy is Unleash the Demon, which gets declared during a friendly mutant or torment's activation. During that activation, that operative can perform 2 fight actions, and one of them can be free. This is really huge for increasing the threat capability of our torments, who can now dish out a lot of pain in a single activation. Also, note that it says this is declared during the activation, so if you fight someone and don't manage to kill them, you can pay a command point to finish them off. This is also a super nasty combo with the Barbed Accursed Gift. I've gotten some disgusting charges into 2 elite models, where I hit one in combat and weaken the other with Barbed, only to get a free second fight with this ploy and finish off the second one now that they're hurt. You won't need this ploy every turning point, but if you can manage to get value out of it, it's a really good investment. Alright, let's talk over equipment options for this squad. The first faction-specific equipment is Baleful Script. Once per battle, as a strategic gambit, you can change one of your accursed gifts that is granted to your entire team. If you choose to change an accursed gift that was given from the Abhorrent Mutation ploy, only that operative benefits from this change. I generally haven't used this much, but I think it's a very important piece to take because it gives you the flexibility of change for the squad. It's hard to know how your opponent is going to play until you start moving models on the table, and this allows you to adapt your game plan midway with minimal penalty. Covert Guises is one faction-specific option that is always getting taken. After revealing this equipment option, roll 1d3. As a strategic gambit in the first turning point, a number of friendly Chaos Cult devotee operatives equal to the result who are wholly within your drop zone can immediately perform a free reposition action, but must end that action wholly within 3 inches of your drop zone. Effectively, you get d3 extra scouting step repositions, but they have to be used on devotees. There are 2 important things about the wording of this equipment option. First, you roll the d3 when you reveal this equipment option, meaning that before you start deploying models, you know how many extra dashes you're getting. That right there allows you to plan who you're going to dash with, which opens up your deployment options and allows you to put some operatives in apparent risk without actually risking anything. Second, this series of free dashes is a strategic gambit in the first turning point. Remember how mutating devotees at the beginning of a turning point is also a strategic gambit? Well, if you sequence this correctly, you can dash your devotees using this equipment and then mutate them, which gets nicely around the fact that you can only dash devotees with this equipment. It doesn't help your Dark Commune operatives, but it can help get your mutants that much closer to the action as you stage for turning point 2. Unholy Talisman gives us a once per turning point ability when an operative is shooting a friendly Chaos Cult operative. In the roll defense dice step, you can retain one of your normal successes as a critical success instead. In my humble opinion, this is the first piece of faction equipment that I pass on. Especially pass on this if your opponent has good access to Saturate, since we are saving on 5s and we need that cover save to even have a chance at surviving most shooting attacks. Generally speaking, I pass on this option because I don't like investing in survivability when this team is pretty lacking in that category. Just position your operatives safely as they advance up the board and recognize that not all of them are going to be surviving the battle. Vile Blessing is a once per battle ability that can be applied to any non-devotee Chaos Cult operative. When an attack die inflicts normal damage on that friendly Chaos Cult operative, you can choose to ignore that inflicted damage. If that friendly operative is a mutant or torment, you must choose to use this equipment before you roll for unnatural regeneration. This is another auto take for the team, since having this ace up your sleeve can really bail out one of your torments when they throw themselves at the enemy. Well worth the 1 equipment slot for this. Other equipment options that are not faction locked but work well for the team would be both types of utility grenades, smoke and stun, ladders, barricades, and razor wire. Smoke grenades can be great for safely covering advances and staging, especially in turning point 2, but they lose a lot of their effect if the opponent can ignore obscuring. Stun grenades are similarly nice because they allow your devotees to affect the board state without having to switch to engage and expose themselves. With such poor range threats on the team, you really want to be staying on conceal until you're close enough to engage the enemy team in melee. Ladders are of course nice to help you control the verticality of the map, and they pair deceptively well with the Deformed Wings Accursed gift, where you can ignore the distance penalty for dropping down. Depending on the map layout, barricades, both light and heavy, can help you in deployment or initial movement staging, and razor wire can hamper your opponent's ability to stage themselves. Even though this team lacks any piercing weapons, I would really caution against taking crack grenades. 4 attacks hitting on 4s with no way to grant rerolls feels really bad. I would much rather keep that operative safe and have them stage either to threaten objectives for the mission or threaten a mutation and charge for the next turning point. The Chaos Cult was one of the last 2 teams released for Kill Team's last edition, and they've seen their fair share of balance changes along the way. They can be an expensive team to collect and hobby, since they require 3 separate boxes to play, but there is some excellent kit bash potential to really make the team your own. This team, simply put, is mentally involved. There are 14 models to keep track of on the table, each of which has a role to play throughout the game, and their job often changes as the game state changes. For example, you might see a really good opportunity for a new Torment to charge and fight several enemy operatives at the beginning of Turning Point 2. So you select for your Torments to have the Barbed Accursed gift, and you're able to smash a pile of enemy operatives right out of the gate. Your opponent isn't going to let that happen again though, so they will probably make your Barbed gift go to waste with the remainder of the game if they can afford to do so. Here's where something like the Baleful Script equipment comes in, so that you can swap from Barbed to Sinewed for future turning points and still benefit from another powerful gift after already getting mileage out of that first one. Thinking in flexible terms like this will help you elevate your Chaos Cult gameplay to really exploit your opponent's weaknesses at every turn. This isn't the only example of where this team relies a lot on pre-planned strategies. We also talked about the ability to mutate into engagement range when you move from a mutant to a torment. This can help keep a torment that much safer by not needing to swap to an engage order in order to fight and dispatch enemy operatives. Speaking of keeping operatives safe, the mutant stage of our Chaos Evolution is actually pretty fragile, and it hurts us a lot to lose a mutant before they can mutate again. Most of the combat pressure from this team comes from the Torments, so do everything that you can to keep your mutants safe until they're ready to evolve again. This can be harder than you think, and you need to balance immediate offensive pressure with pressure in the following turning point. In my opinion, you should always mutate into at least 1 Torment at the beginning of Turning Point 2, but there's a time and a place for whether or not you should generate more mutants or Torments with the remainder of that turning point. This depends on a lot of things, like the opponent's playstyle and team, the board that you're playing on, the mission that you need to accomplish. But you shouldn't just default to the same thing every game. Further layers can be built in this schematic as we consider things like Faithful Follower, the Demagogue's ability to move pieces outside of sequence, our Vile Blessing equipment, and the Iconarch's ability to protect those inside their psychic aura when it's active. In general terms, all of this contributes to what I call the mental load for the team, and this one can really weigh on their pilot. Decision fatigue is a real thing, and it applies to both the players and the opponents of this team. If the opponent isn't familiar with the tricks and tips that the Chaos Cult has, they can easily exhaust themselves trying to avoid every little pitfall. For a competitive environment like a tournament, this brain tax will apply most heavily on the pilot of the Chaos Cult, since they're going to have to deal with those decisions each and every round. All of this to say is that if you want to be good at playing as or against the Chaos Cult, you'll need to put in the time and reps to do so. This is a very complicated team with lots of different board states that it can create. If you want to take this team to an event, just do your homework first, so that you don't have to worry about what tricks you have, and can instead just worry about how and when to use them. Let's talk about strengths and weaknesses. Beginning with the bad, weaknesses are up first. We've already talked about the mental fatigue that comes with piloting such a large and complicated team, so let's move past that one. A related issue is that this team, being 14 operatives, is quite susceptible to area of effect threats that the enemy can bring. Several teams in the game right now have widespread AoE, like Hyrotech Circle, Mandrakes, Sanctifiers, Vespids, and others that I'm sure I'm forgetting about right now. Any of these teams, plus teams with 3 APL operatives who can reliably double kill during an activation, can really threaten to disrupt the setup that the Chaos Cult wants to get going. Because of the dependency on safely creating mutants that then turn into torments, the Chaos Cult needs to be able to buy time for themselves by slowing down the enemy advance. This is much harder to do effectively when the enemy is able to efficiently remove your models from the table with each activation. The strengths of the team are pretty strong in their own right, so let's talk about a couple of those. First of all, they have 10 or 11 activations to start the game, depending on how you want to stagger them. This is a high activation count and can easily allow you to appropriately stage mutants to threaten Turning Point 2 torments, which is a lot of pressure immediately out of the gate. And the icing on that cake, that threat is flexible. You can set up however you best want to proceed in the game, and you can structure where those threats are presented, and you can change pretty quickly if you are diligent about setting up those right pieces into the right spots. Another major strength of the team is the surprising punch that they bring to the fight. When they have their buffs rolling and are stepping forward into fights, these operatives punch way above their weight class. Torments can reliably kill Space Marines, sometimes in 2v1s. Blessed Blades can tag team down a Space Marine in a single activation. The Mind Witch can lock a key operative out of relevance from across the map. A Devotee can neutralize a dedicated counterattack just by jumping in the way and protecting a Dark Commune operative. It can be really frustrating for inexperienced opponents when you're firing on all cylinders because you can make it seem like you always have the answer to every question they ask. Alright, let's talk Tac Ops real quick. The Chaos Cult has access to both the Seek and Destroy and Infiltration categories, but one of these categories feels like a much more natural fit than the other. Specifically, I have preferred to operate out of the Seek and Destroy category, primarily choosing Champion as my Tac Op, and scoring it using the torments that I generate at the beginning of each turning point. The obvious downside to this strategy is that it's harder to score Champion if you aren't going first in the turning point, but smart staging of your torments can help you mitigate this. Also, you don't have to declare your champion for the turning point until after you've chosen who will become a torment for the turn, which allows you a little bit of adjustment on the fly after you know who has initiative. I've experimented a bit with both Implant and Surveillance, but neither of them felt quite right to me. This team can't afford to spend time implanting enemies instead of killing them, especially into elite opponents like when you would primarily choose this Tac Op. Each elite enemy is too threatening to leave alive, so you'll only be scoring your second point on that Tac Op each round if you're losing board control, which isn't a great strategy. As for Surveillance, this team has to honestly move up the board, which makes it difficult to put operatives in position to safely capitalize on this. The operatives who can get extra mobility subsequently have a harder time doing the mission action itself, so it just doesn't synergize quite right. In the end, I prefer to lean into the strengths of the team and just try to focus on getting my champion scored each round as efficiently as possible. In KT24, the Chaos Cult is a specialized team of chaos-enthralled zealots who manifest their gifts of the Chaos Guides throughout the battle. They have a static mix of Dark Commune leadership operatives and general faceless members of the Chaos Faithful, but they still have a great fluidity to the team that allows them to exploit the team across the table from them. This team has honestly been one of my favorites to pick up so far, and even though the team requires hobbying a minimum of 22 separate models, they just feel cohesive and the pieces fit together in a surprisingly complex way for being so bread and butter at first glance. I think this team will struggle in bigger events just because of the mental load, which makes it harder to consistently perform well with the team as the round count of an event increases. But an experienced player of this team will be an absolute nightmare to face deep into a tournament run for the same reasons. I highly suggest finding a local Chaos Cult player and getting to square off against them at least a couple of times so you know what you're getting into if you ever face them for real. They are a flavorful and thematic team that is satisfying to play as and against. And that'll wrap up our introduction to the Chaos Cult team in KT24. If you've made it this far into the video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel so that you don't miss out on our other guide videos as well. The Chaos Cult is a pretty rare team, so if you have any tips or tricks that you like to use, please leave them in the comment section so that others can try them out as well. More guides like this are coming soon, so stay tuned and let me hear those requests. Until next time, have fun and be good if you want to.